there's more people. I mean, those 2% is, will have some opportunity to create the company, right? As compared to the 10 years ago. Our job, I think, as a venture capitalist, their job is, it's only come after the success of the management people on the startup company. They succeed and we succeed.
I see.
Yeah, we are in the same boat. Yeah.
Thank you, Ken. Totally agree with you. I met some Japanese founder who wanted to go to the States and gave up. They didn't live longer in Silicon Valley. Yeah, but you are right. Like living in other country, of course, it's new and challenge, and then have to make new connection. So that not only online, we have to go to in-person event, talk to with a stranger, and then not only one day, like every single day or like every week, we have to do like a kind of a volunteer. Hey, how can I help you? Like give first mindset and helping local events like that. These, what can I say, grassroots activity, 草の根活動, I believe he did it. That's why he established great community in Silicon Valley. So
9 years.
9 years. Oh my God, almost a decade. So if you want to go to States or if you want to go to Japanese market, you should live and then interact with local people. This is super key.
Yeah. I mean, there's a, of course, you don't really force you to do that. If you don't feel like it, you can partner with some person who is, is more outgoing. Yeah. So I think you don't have to. I think the partnering is a big thing. Having some good team is a big thing. I mean, it's very hard to execute on things by yourself. One of the reasons I decided to spin out this from this Japanese large corporation is the team was excellent. The team that working together, there's 5 of them. It was excellent team. And main reason was, I want to be with these guys. Maybe I can achieve a lot of things with, this team. So that is the major reason. So I think having, if you want to go to US and have try to find some, good partners and, try to build a team. And, of course, there's you cannot be like, superhero, but the team can fill in the gap. So I think that is also true starting the company. Yeah.
I see. By the way, I and Ilya, we really love your like a kind of a mentoring personality, right? You love helping founders, young VC or people who want to join your firm. The mentoring mindset is amazing. And also, you wanted to bring Silicon Valley mindset to Japan to change and better improve Japanese startup ecosystem. How do you keep this your mindset in consistently? Amazing.
All right. So entrepreneurs is not everyone. If you go to also average, average Japanese, average people is, of course, he or she is afraid of doing some new things, protective and, don't want to go out. I mean, there's an average. Everybody started talking about average. But entrepreneurship, we are talking, remember that, if you go to the class, 2% of those students is doing, no matter what the teacher said, no matter what the parents says, they want to do what they want to do. We are talking to this 2% of this population. So it is meaningless to talk about average, generic Japanese kind of people and discuss about how we can change it. We cannot change it. But we can, we can push those back of this 2% of people who is willing to execute, who is willing to change the world. He's crazy guys. Yeah, you cannot, just, fit into the large organization culture. So I think it's, I'm not willing to change those average people. I'm willing to really push them, and as a venture capitalist, okay, this guy has a dream. They want to execute on it, but this guy need capital. Yeah. And then it is our role to provide some capital to make his or her dream come true. So that's the main things. Yeah. And definitely there's more people. I mean, those 2% will have some opportunity to create the company, right? As compared to the 10 years ago. Our job, I think, as a venture capitalist, their job is, it's only come after the success of the management people on the startup company. They succeed and we succeed.
I see.
Yeah, we are in the same boat. Yeah.
Same boat. Yeah, you are right. Okay, last question. So tell us about your milestone in 2025.
Okay.
Whatever.
Okay, I think, we are providing some hands-on support to many of the Japanese startups. We invested in 5 companies so far, and we are providing lots of hands-on support when you try to help them accelerate their business or expand their business, do more. We need to expand our network. We need to have more resources for the hands-on support. It can be internally or externally. So we have to build some friends of Global Hands-on VC. Yeah. So that's my major milestone for these organizations. I mean, luckily we are increasing our fund size just last year, so it will give us some room for the expansions. Yeah. So and also I've started raising additional capital our second fund to later this year. So I think that will give us more capital to help those Japanese people, and also more of the human resources or some outside resources to help these Japanese startups. Right. Yeah.
How about like a global startup who want to come to here?
I think that's, that is not in our main target. If this global startup is coming to Japan and the Japanese startup and then go to other country, we can think about that. But mainly our job is helping the Japanese startup because that is missing.
I see.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay. Do you have any?
Last question. Yes. It's not related probably, but the fundraising in Japan and the US is different, right?
Yep.
In terms of the size of the money, I take a size and also and why do you think that that's a big gap between the US and Japan in terms of the fundraising?
Sure. I think that's the US venture investment size was much smaller 10 years ago, 20 years ago.
Right.
So, and it took a lot of time and energy for the US ecosystem to come to this stage. Japan is still in a very early stage of the ecosystem building. And so Japanese venture ecosystem has to provide some huge return to the LP investor, our investor. So in that way, we can increase the size of their VC fund. So the investment style can be different. So it's like a chicken and egg things. But if we have gradually more capital, better the company will be, the bigger the exit. And if the bigger the exit, more money is coming to the VC fund, and the bigger investment size, and the larger the company, and the more better exit. And so that kind of spiral has to go on. You cannot do it instantly. It will take years. Okay. Yeah. So I think, but at the same time, if you think about, compared to Japan and US, did we have a Google-like company? Did we have some NVIDIA kind of company, or those companies who really changed the world and really dominate the world market? We don't see that in the Japanese startup. Of course, some SoftBank or Rakuten is doing a tremendous job, But in terms of technology, I think Japan as a country can do much better. So I think that's globalization, and hence creating some unicorn is our charter.
Right.
And we build a team who can execute on it. So I think that's why I'm trying to accelerate this kind of positive spiral by try to play some significant part of that spiral building.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
We'll take time. Yeah.
But yeah, in probably like 5 or 10 years, we will probably like.
Yeah. I mean,
Be-
globalization is everybody agrees,
Right.
but somebody has to do it.
Yeah.
So I decided to do it. Yeah.
Thanks so much.
Okay.
Okay, Ken, thank you so much for amazing conversation today. Yeah.
Thank you, Kaori. Thank you so much. Yep.
Yeah. Okay, bye bye.
Okay,
Thank
bye-bye.
you. The 3 key takeaways from conversation with Ken, part 3. 1. Living in a market is essential for startup success. Japanese founders who visit Silicon Valley for a short term often struggle to maintain the influence and mindset they gain from the experience. To truly succeed, they must live in the market, build long-term relationships, and immerse themselves in the local ecosystem. This means attending in-person events regularly, talking to strangers, and volunteering in the community. Ken himself spent 9 years in Silicon Valley, which helped him build a strong network and deep understanding of the startup culture. 2. A strong local team is the key to global expansion. Founders don't have to do everything alone. If they are introvert or unfamiliar with a new market, they should find strong local partners who complement their skills and understanding the crucial culture and business landscape. Too often, Japanese companies expanding abroad fail because they work only with Japanese teams and don't empower local talent. Building a diverse, locally integrated team is crucial for success in international market. The successful founders hire and partner with local experts, allowing them to adapt their product and sales strategies effectively. 3. Focus on the right founders, not changing the entire culture. Not everyone is meant to be an entrepreneur, and that's okay. Instead of trying to change mindset of all Japanese people, VCs and mentors should focus on supporting the only 2% of individuals who are truly driven to build global business. These ambitious founders need capital, mentorship, and connections to thrive. Supporting them will naturally create a ripple effect in the startup ecosystem over time. Okay? Thank you so much for watching our episode today. We hope today's conversation will help your future and career. If you like this episode, please subscribe us and give it a like. Okay? Thank you so much. Bye bye. またね。チャオ。